Hi, this is Sam Botstein from MachineSkills.com. In response to a couple of requests, today's tutorial will cover Machine's different slicing modes offered by its sampler and how they relate to breaks. Also, we'll talk about two methods for using those breaks and the resulting slices to create new beats. The first is recomposition and the second is reinforcement. In Machine's sampling mode, which can be entered by pressing sampling on the machine controller, there's a page for slicing, which can be accessed by pressing the third button on the machine controller. By default, Machine Sampler will default to the split mode and result in 4 slices. It'll also detect the BPM of the sample, the tempo, and tell you how many bars it thinks are in the sample. In this case, I have a break that is 2 bars long at 120 BPM, and Machine detected it perfectly. And it's split up the sample into 4 bits, which are exactly a half note long. So this is already a useful enough series of slices to create some interesting compositions. I've applied them to a group here, and by default, Machine will map out the slices evenly across the number of bars it detected based on the BPM it detected and the length of the sample. Just by moving them around a little bit, you can get some interesting compositions. So the first 2 bars here are the original sample, and the second are recomposed just by moving the slices around. But put simply, a lot more could be done if we simply had more slices. So if we return to our original sample, we can simply turn the second encoder and Machine will split it up into 8 different slices. This gives us a lot more flexibility. Here, if we just move around the slices like we did before, we'll get a lot more interesting rhythm. So we had a sort of a natural fill that happened there, all by accident. And if we just layer a couple more samples on top of what we already have in time, we'll get some really interesting results. So the split method works really well, but there's another very good option. After the split mode, there is a grid mode, which may or may not make a difference in terms of the slices that you get, but are essentially just based on a different metaphor. In the split mode, it's essentially evenly splitting up the entire duration of the sample based on the number of slices that you choose. In the grid mode, it's doing the exact same thing, except it is based on the detected BPM and number of bars, and Machine has sliced things up based on the note values, in this case quarter notes, but we could also do 8th notes, 16th notes, and so on. However, the next mode is a lot different. The detect mode will actually give you slices based on the transients that Machine detects. So in this case, the sample is much too long to give each transient its own pad if we apply it to a group. We could apply it to an individual sound, but I want to have access to the pads, and you'll see why later when I use the sampler. So I'm going to return to our first series of slices in which we had sliced up the sample into 4 parts. And now if I enter the sampling mode, it'll evenly fill out 16 slices. And the slices that I got here are pretty clean, but some of the slices have many more than one hit in them. In this case, I'm going to leave them in. I'm not going to micro-edit all the little individual hits, but I will just keep the entire gesture. This is a really interesting aesthetic to work with when using with breaks, I think, and it sure makes things simpler. Here, once again, Machine has mapped out the samples across a 2-bar length that it detected from the original sample, Except this time we have 16 slices, and those slices are based on the transients, so we have a lot of individual hits. Now, if I choose one of these sounds and bring up the sampler, I have access to this zone page where I can simply add additional samples and reinforce or layer on top different sounds. For example, it's straightforward to add 808 sounds under the existing slices from the original sample. So this is a straightforward and fast way to layer a break with some drum machine samples to create a beat quickly. Make sure to subscribe to ADSR on YouTube and check out machineskills.com for all our tutorials.